Okay, I want to welcome everybody back. Hope everyone had a very nice Pesach. And we're beginning what probably will be a two-part series on Mitzvah Kuf Peches and our Minchat series. Mitzvah Kuf Peches is in the Machon Yerushalayim new print of the Minchat to be found. It begins on page Kuf Ayin Tes. As always, I want to begin this year by thanking the very worthy organization TorahAnytime.com for video recording these shiurim and making them available to much wider public. Chayvetz Hashem b'yadam yatzliach. Hashem should send a lot of tremendous success to their very holy endeavors. And I want to dedicate the Torah being learned tonight to the Refuah Shleima of Soya Chaved Bas Chana Masha. Okay, the mitzvah that we're doing tonight is actually very, very apropos for this period of the year for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm going to attempt, God willing, in all future Chinuch shiurim. And gentlemen, please watch your inboxes carefully because I may be changing the starting time. The night, I think, until we get deep into the summer is going to remain Tuesdays, but I'm not 100% sure the starting time is right. But at any rate, it's very appropriate for this time of the year because, like I said, I'm going to be trying. We always devote 2 weeks to a mitzvah. I'm going to be looking more or less 2 weeks ahead or so in the Parshios HaShavua and try to do a mitzvah that's topical to that week, the reading that's 2 weeks from now. And since it's not a leap year and we have double the Parshios, so Achrei Mos Kedoshim will be coming in 2 weeks. In both Achrei Mos and Kedoshim, you have iterations of the Parsha of Arayos, basically the Torah's sex morality code. And I therefore, rather than choosing one particular one, I want to do the mitzvah that's kind of the umbrella, the rubric mitzvah for the whole Parsha of Arayos, what we call, like I said, the Torah's sexual morality. So it's appropriate in that way, it's topical, because the Parsha is coming up. I also feel that it's very topical in as much as we are in the middle of Sfira, and Sfira is about the transitional time for our ancestors who made the exodus out of Egypt, moving away from what is classically known as the Memtesh Sha'arei Tumah to the Memtesh Sha'arei Kedusha, the 49 gates of impurity into which they had sunk during their slave experience in Egypt, moving day by day through the 49 days of Sfiras Omer up to a point of purity and holiness and sanctity where they then became worthy of receiving the Torah. And my point being that we're talking about the birth of a nation, we're talking about Yisrael Kadoshim, the very holy nation of the Jewish people. And I think living as we do in a time that is more saturated with sexual exploitation and immorality than perhaps any other time in human history since the Great Flood, the Great Deluge, according to our sources, there was a unbelievable extreme license. But what you have going on today in Western societies, and there are places that are far less quote unquote prudish than the United States of America, that have even a greater sense of, so to speak, anything goes in this department. I think these are one of the things that really divide the Jewish people, at least when they adhere to the treasure of their heritage, the Torah, and the nations of the world. And I think with all the headlines that we read about today, the politicians, sports figures, entertainment figures, it seems wherever you go, there's infidelity, there's perversion, there's license. And I think if the mitzvah that we're about to learn, although I don't know if time is going to allow, there are distinctions in this mitzvah between Noahides and Jews, but I think if some of these measures had been adopted by other nations of the world, and in earlier eras, more Puritan or Victorian eras, to be specific, had they been adopted by some of the other nations of the world, you wouldn't be having the morass of infidelity and licentiousness and prostitution and so on and so forth that you have today. Okay. Because there are a lot of new terms, we were concentrating quite a bit pre-Pesach on Isuri Achila, on the kosher code, on forbidden foods and so on. So I'm not presuming any knowledge. A lot of new terms that we're going to be coming across in this mitzvah. So therefore I hope you'll indulge me, and we're going to be spending most of the evening, as has not been our habit, in doing the Chinuch, probably more so than the Minchas Chinuch. It's hard to get into the lumdus and the theory when you have no familiarity with the terms being discussed. Okay, first and foremost, and this is going to be the last thing by way of introduction, one of the most fascinating things about this mitzvah is that we all know, and we've all been around long enough to know, that halachic Judaism, okay, is basically divided into two very broad categories. The oraisas, laws, mitzvahs, whether they be positive or negative, that is to say, mitzvahs of commission or of omission, right? Two very broad categories are the oraisa and the rabbanan. Things that are of Torah origin, that are in the Torah itself, and the things that later rabbis, basically ending with the Chasimas HaTalmud, with the closing the Talmudic era, that prophets and rabbis throughout the generations after the revelation of Sinai legislated and promulgated new laws. And the catchphrase that really captures the whole animating idea behind the motivation for rabbinic leadership throughout the generations to augment, as it were, the laws of the Torah itself, are something that we read. And also this is another reason why I feel this mitzvah is so topical. We know that the custom is, during the summer, long Shabbos afternoons, the custom is to study Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers. And a very, very famous Mishnah in the very first parak that was studied last Shabbos, the first Shabbos intervening between Shabbos and Shavuos, is Asu Siyag LaTorah. Make a fence around the Torah. Okay? We live in a post 9/11 era. We do air travel. It's a tremendous hassle to stand on a long security line, and they're examining your bags, and they're taking away your fluids, and they're asking you to take off your shoes. Now, if a time traveler, circa 1965, who could run up to the gate, with 30 seconds left, and then be treated like a king by the TWA or Pan Am staff, with a time travel and come to one of our modern airports, they wouldn't know what they're looking at. Okay, first of all, what happened to all the great airlines? Where's Pan Am? Where's Eastern? Where's TWA? What's this JetBlue? What are these new airlines? Okay, A. But B, the security measures. What kind of madness is this? And if you would tell the person, well, there were 11 Arabs who on September 11th, 2001, turned a couple of transcontinental jets into cruise missiles, so that's why we have to do all this. What? Happened once? And every single flight you've got to go through all these security measures? I say, yes, my good man, because you know that over 2,000 people lost their lives in that singular event. And the worth of a human life justifies all these quote-unquote seemingly unnecessary precautions. Because again, it only takes one terrorist, with a box cutter or some other new, they're always 10 steps ahead of the law, some new measure to get through. And again, we could have casualties numbering in the thousands. Okay, so I think even in the broader culture and the broader society, the notions of extreme checks and measures that have to be implemented and observed scrupulously in order to avoid disaster, I think, again, in the post-9/11 era, there are a lot of things like that, seat belts and airbags and industrial precautions and farm machinery, safety equipment. But it's not so well known by the broad public. This is something that's pan-societal, and I think everyone accepts it. They deal with it. Yeah, it's a hassle, but most people understand the necessity of it, at least until we revert to some ethnic profiling. We understand the necessity of it. Okay. My point being, okay, that the prophets and the early rabbis, okay, were keenly aware, in a way that we can only dream about and aspire to, the disaster of sin. the spiritual catastrophe, both for the sinner's own soul and being adepts at Jewish mysticism and knowing what's going on in unseen worlds as well. Okay? The unbelievable destructive forces and pollution and constriction of light. And again, I don't want to wax too Kabbalistic here because I don't know what I'm talking about either. But they were aware of what a disaster an Aveira Midaraisa, a Torah level sin is. And therefore, they created all kinds of precautions, a thing that sometimes look to us like double precautions and unnecessary and unreasonable and hassle precautions. But I think that's a very good model. What's amazing about this mitzvah that we're going to learn is that here you have it in the Torah itself. One of the first things that we're going to learn is a machlokes Rambam and Ramban, an argument between Maimonides and Nachmanides, okay, as to whether the prohibitions and the Chinuch falls in line with Maimonides, okay, whether this prohibition of the Torah is itself, on a Torah level, something or a case or a precedent where the Torah prohibited B, lest you come to doing A. There's not really that much wrong with B in and of itself. Okay? But the Torah, anticipating all the good Jewish lawyers of the ACLU, understood the slippery slope propensity for human malfeasance, that once we start doing one thing bad, things tend to snowball and we slide downhill very quickly, and we can come to doing a lot of bad things. So the Torah itself is going to prohibit certain activities, lest you come to doing the ultimate wrong activity. Okay, that's it. Enough preambles. Let's tuck right in. Okay. You can see in your handout the pages are numbered with Roman numerals, and the paragraphs of both the Chinuch and the Minchas Chinuch are numbered with regular Arabic numerals. So I'm starting from the Chinuch, that's the block letters in the middle. Paragraph 1. Shelo lehisadein ba'achas mikol harayos. A person should not, and I have no better single one-word English translation of this, luxuriate oneself in any of the forbidden relatives. Okay? The Hebrew word, the singular, is erva, which sometimes is translated as nakedness. Nakedness in particular meaning genital nakedness. Okay, but the plural, arayos, has become a catch-all phrase that really covers the incest and adultery elements of the Torah's sexual morality. Okay, so he borrowed this terminology from the Rambam. The Rambam writes the same thing in Sefer HaMitzvos. But it's interesting, the verbiage is interesting, and I'm just saying it's interesting, I don't really have any great profound understanding of it. The way they describe this catch-all prohibition that we're going to see covers a lot of disparate activities is that you shouldn't luxuriate yourself in these kind of relations. Okay, now what does that mean exactly? What are the arayos? Shelo l'saden b'achas mikol arayos v'hein krovos v'eshes ish v'nida. That means relatives, those relatives that the Torah prohibited us from sexual intimacy with. Eshes ish means a married woman. Anida means a menstruating woman. Okay? Menstruation initiates the halacha category of nida. Okay? Cessation of menstruation does not end it. It can only be ended through a purification process that culminates with immersion in a kosher mikveh, kosher ritual. Okay. Va'afilu below bia. This is talking about absent actual sexual intercourse. There are other psukim, other verses in the Torah that prohibit sexual intercourse with each one of the prohibited relatives in particular. There'll be a pasuk saying brother on sister, sex is forbidden. There'll be a brother saying mother on son, sex is forbidden. There'll be a pasuk saying that being intimate with another man's wife or with the own wife when she's menstruating and so on. Right? But this catch-all thing is all kinds of a very wide range of human sexual behavior, and a lot of us would not even consider it sexual behavior. Wooing, courting, romancing behavior, okay, that falls short of actual sexual intercourse, it's prohibited. Okay. Kagon, for example, chibuk, hugging. Right? Nishuk, kissing. V'chol adom alayla pulos haros, and anything comparable to these evil activities. Now, obviously, it's not evil when we're talking about one's own wife when she's in a state of purity. But the fact that you're doing it together with someone who is prohibited to you in the ultimate expression of human affection, that's what makes it evil. Shemamikim behem balei hazima, hachol chen achar hahevel vayehabalu. These are things that licentious people deepen themselves in. Again, I'm not exactly sure of its verbiage here. These are the kind of people that, to paraphrase the prophet Jeremiah, go after vanity, go after empty and vain things, and they themselves become empty and vacuous people. Shenamar, where does the Torah prohibit hugging and kissing? And we're going to see a host of other prelude to sexual intercourse activities. Okay? Shenamar, ish shall call sher b'sar lo sikrivu legalos erfa. Each and every person, to any relative of his flesh, shall not come close to uncovering their nakedness. The verse does not say shall not uncover their nakedness, shall not even come close. What is coming close? This is coming close but no cigar. Even in our own very modern idiom, we say, well, we didn't go all the way. But perhaps you went some of the way, maybe 10% of the way, maybe 50% of the way, maybe 95% of the way. You didn't go all the way. Okay? But you came close. Okay? How close is close? Okay, our sages determine how close is close. Certainly, we've seen already that hugging and kissing is considered coming close. The explanation of this verse is Kilu Amar Leisasu Shum Kreva. Do not do any act of closeness that causes and serves as a means to a person to uncover nakedness. Okay. Now, unless one is a rapist, okay, in most permitted forms of sexual union, the preamble is these kind of activities he's described so far, right? So we understand how this is something that brings a person to sexual intercourse, and if sexual intercourse is prohibited with such a partner, so coming close to it is what the Torah is prohibiting in this verse. And so did the rabbis of blessed memory extrapolate. The pasuk says you should not come close to uncovering. Prior to this verse, I only knew that you shouldn't uncover the nakedness itself, which again is the euphemism for actual sexual intercourse. How did I know you shouldn't even come close? Talmud Lomar, the pasuk comes to teach you, to a woman in her menstrual impurity, you should not even come close. Well, from that verse, I will only know the particular prohibited relationship with a menstruating woman has both the prohibition of neither sexual intercourse itself nor in coming close. How do I know that this applies to all the prohibited relatives? Our pasuk, our verse. Torah came and taught us about all the arayas, don't come close. Ish el kol sher b'sarei, to any relative of his, you shouldn't come close. V'sham nemar, there it says, v'nichrasu anafashos ha'osos, the souls that do it should be cut off. Shema tamar, perhaps you're going to say, yiyu chayav and kares ala kreva levad, that for hugging and kissing, you should also get this very, very severe penalty of what's called kares, of being cut off from your nation. Tamalarma ho'osos. No, that verse mitigates it and says no. It's only the ones who actually do it. Do it, what's the it here? What we call going all the way. V'loya kreves. It's not, the kares does not apply to coming close. Okay, before we start number 2, let's recapitulate a little bit what we read in number 1. The Chinuch is going along the sheet of the Rambam, of Maimonides, that krevel arayos, are coming close to doing a prohibited sexual union, is something that is prohibited by the Torah itself. The Ramban, Nachmanides, We haven't read it yet anywhere, but just, again, I don't know how far we're going to get and how much we're going to cover. So I would be remiss if you walked away from this evening and didn't know that the argument exists. In very broad terms, and again, hopefully we'll get a little bit more specifically, Nachmanides says no. This is not what the pasuk means. Okay? That's not what Sigrafula Galasai means. Doesn't mean that foreplay or other forms of coming close to prohibited sexual intercourse are forbidden by the Torah itself. Nachmanides learns that other than one particular act, everything else is what we call Yisurim Derabanan. Hugging and kissing someone whom you are not allowed to marry is prohibited. But it's prohibited on a rabbinic level. It's not prohibited on a Torah level. Okay, what the Ramban does with these psukim, let's wait and see on that. But just know that's a very important and broad argument between Maimonides and Nachmanides. Are these activities prohibited on a Torah level or only on a rabbinic level? However, big, bold, precedent-setting point over here is that according to the Rambam, according to the Sefer HaChinuch, according to many other Rishonim that fall into line with the Rambam's approach, we have a precedent of something on a Torah level itself that really is the precedent for all rabbinic ordinances. For this whole concept of what it says in Pirkei Avos is Asur Siyag LaTorah, make a fence around the Torah. Here the Torah itself is making a fence around it. Okay? And you see there's a difference in gradation of severity. Okay? The arayos themselves, a sister, a parent, another man's wife, are a minimum. I'm talking about real, actual sexual intercourse, are a minimum of an isakaris, of this heavenly retribution of being cut off from your nation. In many cases, an earthly court can administer capital punishment for such sexual crimes and sins. But when it comes to hugging and kissing, those are the two we've learned so far, we're going to see a few more, right? Then it's only what we call a lav, a garden variety transgression, for again, which if our justice system would be up and running, the penalty would be corporal, malchus, a flogging, on a level with wearing a wool and linen combination, on a level with eating treif, eating ham or pork. Okay? That's what level this aver would be on. Okay? So you see the Torah itself, okay, doesn't consider it on one level. Hugging and kissing another man's wife, as odious as it may be, okay, is not a capital offense. Okay? Having actual sexual intimacy with another man's wife is. Right? So why doesn't the Torah want you to hug and kiss her? Because it can be the prelude to the thing that the Torah really doesn't want you to do. That's what I'm saying. That this principle, this idea that we prohibit activity B, okay, not because it itself ought to be prohibited, yeah, but because it can lead to something disastrous, that has a precedent within the Torah itself, within the Araises. Okay? People's Exhibit A, if you walked away from tonight's class with only that, would have been well worth the price of admission, the very high price of admission that we charge here. Right? Okay. Any questions before I move on? Yes.
It says that Chazal say, Ein li ela shelo yigale minayin shelo yikarev, Talmud Lomer, and this is another pasuk. Why doesn't it say lo tikravu legalos? Why is it? It says it right there. Lo tikravu legalos.
No, it's because this is a quote from the Safra,
right?
And the Gemara is comparing and contrasting the lo tikravu legalos, the pasuk that we're learning tonight, which again is part of the preamble to all the arayas, and the specific pasuk that it says by Nida, yeah, to put them together and to say that the v'nikrasu hanafashas ha'osos, which I believe says either by Nida or by Eshes Ish. Okay, Sham Yutes. Yeah. Where does it say Loisikrav? No, nikrasu hanafashas Sham Chavtes. Yeah, I think that's by Eshes Ish. Anyway, basically what we're trying to say is that you learn from the klal and the prat back and forth. Okay, we're using the psukim that it says In general, by neither, and I'm almost 100% sure that the last one, the v'nichus on the is talking about Be'esh Balkar. Do you remember? V'nichus on the do you remember how that pasuk begins?
No.
Okay, so let's look it up. Will you just give me a chumash quickly?
Is the question, my question?
Thank you, we're saying that we're playing them off one another. One tells me that kurva is asim in Atara, at least again according to the Chinuch and the Rambam, and the other one tells me it's asim in Atara, but it's on his akaris. It's just a plain off. Hanafashas osos.
Ki kosher yaseh mikol ha'toivos.
Mikol ha'toivos. Okay, that sounds to me like a klal pratu klal. Okay, so I don't have the Gemaras in front of me. I don't know if this is working with a klal pratu klal, this is working with a dav shai b'klal v'yatzim na klal lo'lam and alatzim yatzah olam and al kol yatzah. The exact interplay between neither and the other bookend psukim over here, like I said, are more general. Is it focused properly or not? Okay. You know what I'm saying? Or not?
No, because I don't understand why it says Eini ela shalo yigala menayin shalo yikarev Talmud loimer va'al isha benidas tumasa lo tikarev. Why does it use that pasuk when it's the pasuk that it's asking from says lo tikravu legalos? It says lo tikravu. Why is it saying I don't know? I only know don't reveal. How do I know don't even come close? Because this other pasuk says lo sikravu, but the pasuk that is asking from says lo sikravu legalos. Lo sikravu. That's how I know not to come close. Lo sikravu.
In other words, what's the mila of lo sikrav that it says b'loshin yachid by nido over the lo sikravu that it says over here b'loshin ravin?
The question the Chinuch is asking is
yeah, there's not a loshin of the Chinuch. He's quoting a safra over here. There's the safra. So what would I have thought? Like sikru ainli elish lo yigala. What do you mean? It says it should say ishi shakol
no, it's
lo yigalu.
It says lo sikravu in the three words.
Yeah, I understand. I hear. I don't know the answer. It's a good question, and I would have to look up the safra with the mefarshim inside. I don't know. It's a very good question. I don't see the mila. A cursory glance here. I don't see the mila of the second pasuk over the first pasuk. Okay, but the importantly, but the main reason why he brought in this safra, is for the way it ends. That v'nichus on a osos. That even though I hold like the Rambam that this is the Raisa, the kares only goes on the actual intercourse itself, not any of the kurvas. Okay, let's move on to paragraph number 2. V'nichbal halav b'sazeh ba'amro. And this law was repeated in another pasuk when the Torah said, "V'losasu mikol hatoevos." You shouldn't do any of the abominations. Sheyichol kol ela shem toavos Hashem. This includes all of these matters, which are the abomination of God. Okay, it's not just the beer, the intercourse itself, that kaviyachol that Hashem abominates, but hugging, kissing, and whatever. We'll see. We'll learn some other activities that also fall under this prohibition. Now, that's a stained glass word. That's a King James Bible kind of word, an abomination. Sounds terrible, but really, what does it mean? Semantically, what is an abomination? What does a tayeva mean? Okay. So this is very interesting. He says as follows: Klomer sha'os yischrachik min hatova. Umeisim meralav hashkochas Hashem Baruch Hu. V'zeh pirish tiyuv Hashem b'chol mokum u'fi masha shamati. The Chinuch is giving us some insight, something that he was makabel, that he learned from his Rabbi. Okay, that wherever the Torah says that the act is being described as an abomination or abominable to God, what that means is it causes a schism between the sinner and God. Okay. God is distant from somebody who does this. Okay? Just as something that a human being would find abominable is something that they try to stay very, very far away from. That's the idea. The idea is you do this, okay, your intimacy with God is being damaged. Don't think that you can do this and walk out with your relationship with God as hunky-dory and as close as it was before. And in particular, and again, this is way beyond our ken. This goes into the realms of Jewish philosophy and the Jewish mystical tradition. this would require, a 10-week series unto its own. What exactly does divine providence mean? And what does divine providence mean, in particular for Jews vis-a-vis the rest of humanity, and vis-a-vis humanity versus the animal kingdom? Okay, and great Jewish philosophers have had, very major arguments about this. Okay? But suffice it to say that if we start as our baseline of some kind of hashgacha pratis, some kind of idea that their causality is an illusion, and that every single thing that happens to a human being is being orchestrated and supervised by God, okay? When a person sins in this way, some of that is lost. On some level or another, the person starts to live their lives abandoned to the forces of nature and causality. How can those two things even coexist? How can you say an all-knowing, omniscient God that some of the people on earth, are subject to causality and some are getting the divine direction from Him? I don't know. Like I said, we need a 10-week series on that. I'm just reading and translating the words of the Chinuch. Your life is no longer being directly administered by God. If you do things that quote-unquote are an abomination. Okay? And an abomination is not limited to sexual indiscretions, although you see the word repeated here quite often. Okay? Somebody who cheats on weights and measures, another mitzvah that we did at one time in this series, is also described as a Tayavis Hashem. Okay. The Gamkein, Mashakazu B'Sofa Inyan. Another thing to bear in mind is something that it says at the end of the Parsha of Arayos. And he's concentrating here on all the, like I said, the big tent, umbrella prohibitions, not in particularly prohibited relationships. All of these abominations were perpetrated by the indigenous population of this land, meaning what we call today the land of Israel, or depending on your political orientation, maybe the land of Palestine. But when it was called the land of Canaan, okay, the Canaanites preoccupied the land before the Israelites did. And all of them did all of these things. Yeah? And I had a word that's very close to an abominable or disgusted reaction. Akutz, I believe that the etymology of the word akutz comes from the word kites, which means a thorn in Hebrew. But akutz means like a person has a natural, drawing back reaction when they touch a thorn. That kind of an idea. Hayini and Leimer, Shamida Maguna Ma'od. This is to say that this midah of sexual license, and he seems to be saying even things short of sexual intercourse itself, is very disgusting. Okay, it's an anthropomorphism. Anything that is disgusting and evil in the extreme is something the Torah will describe as God hating it. It's all along the lines that I said. What that means by saying divine hatred means that a withdrawal of direct divine supervision, aka providence. These anthropomorphism, these attributions of human-like traits, in this case a visceral, adverse, emotional reaction to God, is just to make the book that we call the Torah readable by human beings. If you would talk in pure abstractions about the divine, about things that human beings have no way of connecting with or understanding, it would be an even more closed book than it is. So very often the Torah will attribute human attributes to God. Doesn't mean that God is actually physical, actually human. During the Exodus from Egypt, it talks about a mighty arm and an outstretched arm and flaring nostrils and echvesvos. Right? These are, symbolic, conceptual terms. They don't describe the deity itself. Of course not. Okay.
Does this mean to break the ear?
No, it's pronounced l'saber, not l'shaber. Okay. I think l'saber in this case is more along the lines of to satiate. To give somebody hungry.
But the shin base resh is there is the show resh, even though even from breaking, but the shever.
Right, yeah, shever b'mitzrayim.
It was shever
to assuage the hunger.
Right. Whatever.
Okay. V'loshen sefra the Lashon of Safra, I'm surprised saying this here because he was quoting the Safra above as well. K'maisa Eretz Mitzrayim and K'maisa Eretz Canaan. Okay? The Torah, again, has a preamble to the whole Parsha of Arayos, to the whole sex morality. And it says, do not do like the land you came from or like the land you're going to. Okay? In other words, it seems that both ancient Egyptian and ancient Canaanite civilization were infamous for licentiousness and this kind of immorality. Okay, it says, the end of the pasuk is, and this is very important to know. It says at the end of the pasuk, "Lo sasun," you shall not do. Uvechuko seim lo selechu. You shall not walk in the ways of the goyim. Now, poskim halachic authorities throughout the centuries have had very, very divergent views on what precisely is prohibited when the Torah says, "Uvechuko seim lo selechu." Do not walk in the ways of the non-Jews. Okay, some of it is literal, some of it is halacha, some of it is what we call mil de chasidus, going above and beyond the call of duty. Okay, we certainly know, just to take an example, that in contemporary Torah observant society, that Hasidic society is much more careful in distancing themselves from westernized modes of dress than is non-Hasidic society. Right? You won't find a clean-shaven chassid. I mean, you will, but they're few and far between. Right? You will rarely find a Hasidic guy, wearing a short coat. They almost all wear the knee-length coats. Right? And so on. Whatever. It's not Western. The old joke they say that a Vizhnitz chassid who worked in the Diamond District was commuting from Monsey one day. So some Hasidim take it for the Vizhnitz Hasidim take it so far that they will not wear the ribbons on their hats on the left side because that's considered a westernized style. Even though they're wearing a hat that no Western person has worn probably in 200 years, it doesn't matter. They've got the ribbons on their right side. So anyway, there was this guy who was commuting from Monsey to the Diamond District one day, and Nebuch, his car broke down on the GW Bridge, and there were people going frantic. They were dredging the river for him. A kid, instead of showing up at his office at 9 in the morning, shows up at 1. I said, "What happened to you? Where were you?" So I said, "Well, look, my car broke down on the bridge. I figured I'll take the Monsey bus back, but I had to get to work, so I walked the rest of the way." I said, "You walked?" He says, "You walked through Inwood and Spanish Harlem and Harlem. You walked through all these tough neighborhoods. Nobody mugged you. How did you come out of there alive?" He says, "Very simple." He says, "I turned around my hat. Nobody could tell I was Jewish." Right? Right? I looked like one of them, I was a gangster, All right. So, but just to bring a little balance and a little common sense, and I wouldn't call it common sense. I know, I'm not mocking, the Chassidish Paiskim have their Messiah, have their tradition in Hira, into what falls under this rubric of but it's very interesting, the words of the Safra. Listen to this. Yachal lo yivnu binyana, I know binyana, it should be binyanim, I believe. Kamosam uvechukasam lo yisalechu. Don't walk in the ways and the statutes of the non-Jews. Well, they live in homes. Perhaps we should all live in tent cities. Okay? They wear trousers. Perhaps we should wear skirts. They shower. Maybe we shouldn't. How far does this go? At what point do I have to stop living my life as a naysayer to the Goyish culture? To which the Safra answers, Talmud Lomar, don't walk in their statutes. Look at what they legislated. In particular, this pasuk wasn't said as a preamble to the Torah kosher code, which we just read last week. It wasn't said as a preamble to the Torah civil code on business ethics, on stealing, on lending and borrowing, on the way neighbors are supposed to get along, on inheritance law. This was said as a preamble to the Torah's sexual morality, to which the Safra answers. And this is unbelievable if you know the current debates going on across the country, from Albany to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to Prop 8 in California. Listen to this. What we're talking about, what Jews shouldn't do is, don't go according to the statutes of these ancient licentious cultures. We're not talking about their architecture. Okay? You want to do a Spanish mission style house, yeah, or a Greco-Roman pillars in front of your house, that's fine. Okay? Don't go according to the statute. What statutes are we talking about? Listen to this. I'm telling you, your hair is going to stand on them. V'sham nemer mahayos, and the Safra concludes, what did they do? What did they legislate in ancient Egypt and ancient Canaan? Ha'ish na'ish v'ish na'isas isha. Homosexual marriage. Men married men, and women married women. That's what I don't want you to imitate the Goyim with. Those are the kind of things that God abominates, and v'okutzbam. I feel like pricked by a thorn when a culture, when a society does that. Right? It's one thing to engage in the behavior. It's another level to have the longings without acting out on the behavior. But it's a whole different level of depravity to give it legal sanction, to pretend that this is marriage.
Also, yeah, but that's to me by the Chukim, the statutes. They actually enacted this
Yes.
as a law for them to
Yes.
do this. A license to
According to our tradition, in ancient Egypt and in ancient Canaan, there were laws on the books allowing homosexual marriage, both male and female.
Happened again.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's unbelievable. History repeating itself.
No wonder.
Maybe that's why Hashem.
And the last one, listen to this.
Trying to get us out of Egypt.
Listen to this last one. The Isha Nisas L'shnei Anashim. Female polygamy. A woman could have two husbands.
I haven't seen that yet.
Well, okay. Well, be a little forward thinking. It's coming. Okay. I'll never forget one of the early legislative attempts at gay marriage in New York City, almost 20 years ago. I think I must have seen it. I saw a great political cartoon, right? That they had like it was like a scene out of Orwell's Animal Farm. They had like a bunch of bovines, cows and oxen, but upright, standing on two legs, with massive protests, around the City Hall in Lower Manhattan, and the steers were all carrying signs that said, "We're steer and we're here. You better get used to it." Okay, so that's the next thing that's coming. There's an organization out there. I don't want to. We're doing a Torah shir over here, but I think it's part of the shir because they said that in ancient Egypt. Do you know that there's an organization out there that's there's still, thank God, there's still a fringe lunatic group, but you never know. 10, 15 years from now, they may move towards the center. That the whole raison d'etre of this organization, okay, is to get all pedophilia laws off the book, to totally legalize relations between adults and children. Right?
Yeah, this is the
Okay.
North American
Fine.
something.
Yeah. That's where I'm from. Okay. Let's skip to paragraph 4. Okay? Medina HaMitzvah, Mash'atzu Chacham Zichron Levracha B'zeh Ageder. Okay, so here, the Chinuch says, yes, I agree with the Rambam, that there are certain non-sexual intercourse activities, in particular what we learned so far, hugging and kissing, which are prohibited on a Torah level, but there are a whole host of other things that are prohibited on a rabbinic level. And here are some of them. V'hu, shelo yikra et ha'adam biyada v'yirmitz ve'en of lachas ben arayis. Okay? You cannot do non-verbal communication, winks, come hither stares, lascivious hand or foot gestures to any woman to whom you are prohibited to marry, to be intimate with. Okay? Do not play with them at all. Okay? What kind of play he's referring to that doesn't involve hugging and kissing or winking and blinking? I'm not quite sure, but whatever. It's pretty catch-all. To smell their perfume is prohibited. Nor to look at women other than one's own wife. Okay? Even a kala, even a newlywed bride, with the intent of getting some kind of of a sexual charge out of it, an eye candy experience. Don't think that this is limited to the parts of the anatomy that are normally covered. Even to look at their pinky with the intent to derive benefit. Ooh, what a beautiful pinky, right? That's also prohibited. Except for a person's own wife, which is, in that case, it's allowed for the person to look at her beauty. Even when she is forbidden to him, when he cannot be sexually intimate with her, it would still be allowed for him to look at her beauty. Okay, Chazal understood that that much of a curb, that much of a control we have over our appetites, that if our own wives are going to eventually become permitted to us again, so that much to look at them when they're prohibited to us is still okay. The chazaka, the insight of, remember when I started the class I gave the model, right? The hassle of modern air travel. I mean, where's it going to end? We have to give over 2 ounces of toothpaste. I mean, you do see people getting exasperated and rolling their eyes by the security lines at times. And every one of us is, at least, even if we didn't articulate it because we didn't want the TSA people to hassle us, to start mugging us and doing a body cavity search on us, so maybe we kept our mouth shut. But I think many of us have had the thought cross our minds, and we rolled around and said, come on, this is too much already. How much is too much? I mean, you're being ridiculous. You're being preposterous already at this point. Stop hassling me and let me get on the plane. Right? So, Chazal understood this much is prohibited, but this much is okay. Right? Yes, the woman's in neither. She may be your own wife, but she's in neither. If you were to be sexually intimate with her, it's an issa kares, just like a brother and sister incest, but it's different. This is your lawfully wedded wife. She will become permitted to you again eventually. Here we trust you. For something that's going to be permitted, lachazman, to look at her is okay. Here there is a difference between the parts of the body that are normally covered or uncovered. You can look at her pinky, you can look at her arm up to the elbow, but the parts of the body that halachically, according to the laws of tznius, of modesty, a woman is supposed to keep covered, even if she's your own wife, while she's in either, you shouldn't be looking there. So that you shouldn't be cloaked, it means you shouldn't be stimulated too much by your inclination to evil. Here, you may not be able to control yourself. Okay. Roman numeral 2, page 2. Okay, let's do paragraph 5 as well. Again, these are according to everybody, even according to the Chinuch and the Rambam. What I'm reading here is already rabbinic prohibitions, rabbinic level prohibitions. Gamkein, she'aser lihistakel afilu b'sayra shel isha hasurlei. It's forbidden to look at the hair of a woman who is prohibited to you, which is why married women, when they're out and about, cover their hair. Also, and even to hear her voice with the intent to derive some kind of pleasure, some kind of sexual charge out of the voice of a woman. And again, most say that this is only a singing voice, not a speaking voice. Okay, that's also prohibited. So again, this is what we call a lek and a shmek. I'm not teaching halacha l'maisa over here. We're just getting a broad overview of things that are prohibited by dint of this mitzvah, either the Raisa or the Rabbanan. But you can see already that it's very complex. There's certain things that depend on time. There's certain things that depend on location. I mean location of the anatomy. There's certain things that depend on intent. Right? He doesn't say that you've got to look at the hair, with the intent of getting some kind of a charge out of it. Right? It seems to be a blanket prohibition. You can't look at the hair of a woman who's prohibited to you. Right? Nevertheless, we know you could look at your sister's hair, right? So where does that fit in? But when it comes to hearing the voice of a woman, here he sticks in the qualifier with the intent of deriving benefits. Again, halacha l'maisa is not the Minchat class, but just understand that there are different gradations, and they're what we call we're learning a rishon over here, the diyukim. You have to go over the verbiage with a fine tooth comb. To even look at the colored clothing of a woman. What does colored clothing mean? It doesn't mean dafka colored. It doesn't mean that the little black dress is okay. But dafka floral print is forbidden. When Chazal said colored clothing, they meant begadim noim shadakim lasasim begadim tzvuim asal stakman. Very nice clothing. Okay, we're talking about a shmat shift. A robe. That they wear. For mopping around the house. That's not what we're talking about. But if you're talking about something that they might wear when they're dressed to the nines, it really doesn't matter if it's color or monochromatic. It's just in the times of Chazal, that was the style. If it was something, for evening wear, so to speak, something to be very dressy in, so then it would be colored. Okay, we're not talking about that it would be prohibited for a Jewish man to run a wholesale woman's distributorship. I'm not going to go into retail. Retail might be shilas. Yeah, but certainly if a guy wants to be in the shmata business and he wants to sell dresses rather than men's suits, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, the woman who normally wears this dress, right? Gown or dress or whatever it is she's wearing. It belongs to her. So if you've got that kind of awareness, then you shouldn't be looking at her clothes, even if she's out of the clothes. You see Chazal's incredible insight into human psychology, and in particular, the libido of human psychology. Okay, because as a result of looking at the clothing, you'll come to thinking and cogitating about the woman who wears it. They're also prohibited. You shouldn't be asking after the welfare of a married woman, even through her husband. Okay. Let's move on. Let's skip a few. Let's move on to number 11. If you're going to ask me a question on Allah K'lamais, I'm not going to answer you. You have a question on Allah K'lamais, right?
Did they meant just Shalom Eshli, but if you were just trying to find out about somebody, how they're feeling because you knew they were sick or something, you couldn't even ask about that Shalom, or that,
A question on Allah K'lamais. I'm not going into it. Number 11. Okay, skip to Roman numeral page 3, or if you got the Hebrew numerals, page Kuf Pei Aleph, and I number the paragraph 11. Okay. Another prohibition that the rabbis promulgated is seclusion. You cannot be alone with the arayas. There are some exceptions to the rule, but a woman who is prohibited to you in this part of the Torah, and this is what we call the Parsha of Arayas, such a woman you're not allowed to be alone with. You cannot be secluded with her. Ritzoni Lomar, Im Kol HaArayas Dvar Torah. Okay? With all of the Arayas, and that is, okay, I'm not sure exactly how to read this Dvar Torah. If it means to say that it's not an Issa D'Rabbanan, it's Issa D'Araisa, or it means with all of the Arayas that are prohibited in the Torah, it's Asa D'Rabbanan. I'm not quite sure what he means. Hold on half a second. What's the Chavtes on the bottom here? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah? When he says Vaidam, I started reading this paragraph wrong. Forgive me. If the people are there from Torah anytime, and you're looking at this part of the shir, you can edit the last 45 seconds to a minute or so. Let's take 2. Let's try this again. Paragraph number 11. Chazal interpreted this mitzvah of loy sikrevu legalis erva. They're reading, they're defining it into the pasuk. She'asal l'siyachadim kol arayas. It's forbidden to have yichud with any of the arayas. We're saying im kol arayas dvar Torah, min haTorah. Okay, so far, just to recapitulate, we have 3 activities that, according to the Rambam, the Siyasa, according to Maimonides, and those Rishonim who fall into line with them, and our author, the Chinuch, being one of them. Hugging is prohibited on a Torah level, kissing is prohibited on a Torah level, and seclusion is prohibited on a Torah level. Ben skena, ben yalda, whether the woman is old or young. Shayichud legalus erva hugayra, because seclusion, okay, the old refrain that we have in popular music, no one knows what goes on behind closed doors. So once the doors are closed, right, even sinners want privacy, right? So privacy, when it comes to matters sexual, is a prelude to activity. And if the activity is prohibited, the privacy is prohibited as well. Okay? Chutz min ha'em and b'na, v'hav and bito, v'habal ha'mishta nida shemitar. There are exceptions to this rule, though. A father is allowed to have yichud, to be in seclusion with his own daughter. A mother is allowed to be in seclusion with her own son. And a husband is allowed to be in seclusion with his own wife, even while she is a nida. Chutz mechasen shepir she'ishtay nida kaim she'yivel. With this exception, you have a newlywed couple, they're lawfully wedded, they had chuppah v'kedushin, right? But before they were ever able to physically consummate the marriage, they never had sexual intercourse yet. The woman gets a period, the bride gets a period. No, they cannot be alone together. Okay, the order for the young couple, having never been together with one another, is a little bit too overpowering. Because I'll calibrate it that way, and they didn't want them to have yichud either. What happens at Jewish weddings when the bride is anida, again, is a subject for halacha lamaisa class, but suffice to say that it happens. It's something. I will tell you this much: the percentage is higher among non-Hasidic weddings because the Hasidic Paiskim have a Messiah and Psak, like I believe it's the Rush. I forget which one of the Rishonim say that chupas nida is not kinda. You can make kedushin on a nida, but you cannot make chuppah on a nida. So therefore, they jump through hoops. They do everything they can to possibly avoid the eventuality of the kala being a nida at the chasana. Okay, which is why you will often notice, if you've ever been invited to a Chassidish chasana, that the invitations go out usually only 2 or 3 weeks before the wedding, and there are no response cards. Because it's too soon. Nobody's going to get their act together. It's one reason. They have another reason why don't send response cards, but that's part of the timing. Now, it's not always just a question of whether or not the bride was a nida on the night of her chuppah or not. Right? Sometimes the bride cannot be a nida, and her period could be 2 weeks off, but for one reason or another, the couple was not able to consummate before she does get her first period. Okay, so then they could have that issue to deal with themselves. But on the actual wedding night, it's much more prevalent. I don't know. I can't give you a statistic. Talk to a Rav who handles nida shaylos. I don't know, but I would say that that's more prevalent among non-Chassidish people than among Chassidish people. Okay. It's also permitted, right, to have yichud with a male, even though homosexuality is prohibited. As a matter of fact, we learned just now that the preamble to the Parsha Arayos, in particular, refers to laws that were on the books in ancient Egypt and ancient Canaan that allowed for gay male marriage, for lesbian gay marriage, and for polygamy by women. All right, those would have that we don't want Jews traveling. Nevertheless, on these kind of arayas, okay, that are not just things that the Torah prohibited, but that many people have no natural inclination for in the first place, bestiality and homosexuality. So there, yichud was allowed. A Jewish rancher can tend to his animals in the barn alone. He doesn't need shmiri. He doesn't need somebody watching him to make sure that that he's not going to be intimate with his livestock. Klal Yisrael was not nechshed al kach. Now he says this very pointedly. I will tell you that there's a famous Gemara. I don't know if it's talking about for all time or just for contemporaneous Romans at the time that the Gemara was being written. But it says that a Jew should not have yichud with a non-Jewish male, because they are chashid. They could spontaneously combust homosexually, so to speak, and attack the Jew that they're secluded with. So a Jew should not be alone with a non-Jewish male. Okay, whether that's halacha l'maisa again, or whether it applies only to the times of the Gemara, Again, this is not a halacha l'maisa class. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just saying the fact that he said shalei nachshulu Yisrael akach is to be taken very pointedly. Okay. Kashira Maisa Amnon v'Tamar, when the Maisa of Amnon and Tamar, for those of you who are not familiar, there's an episode in Tanakh, there's an episode in the Jewish biblical canon where King David had numerous wives and numerous children, and two of his children were Amnon was a male and Tamar was a female, and Amnon forced himself upon his sister Tamar. Okay. As a result of that, Gaza Dovid Besdin al Yichud de Pnuya. So there, the Torah prohibited Yichud, going into seclusion, even with a single girl. Tamar was not a married woman at the time of the attack. Nevertheless, they came along and they prohibited Yichud of a Pnuya. A Pnuya is not one of the arayas, and therefore it would not be prohibited according to the Chinuch and the Rambam on a Torah level, but it is prohibited on a rabbinic level. Pretty ancient piece of rabbinic legislation, as it dates back to the times of King David himself. V'yatinu Zichron Levracha listakel b'fnei Penuya l'misha mistakel b'ladash yisa isalisha imti na'benav. You can look at the face of a single woman if it's object matrimony. If he does girl watching, that's something prohibited. But if you're courting somebody, if you're dating somebody, and you want to know, should I marry her? Okay, we don't expect the date to show up wearing a veil on her face, and you can look at her face and decide, this is somebody who I feel attracted to, who I want to marry, or I don't want to marry.
Shammai v'Hillel.
Yeah.
Skipped over that one.
What did I skip?
Shammai v'Hillel.
Oh, Shammai v'Hillel Gazral Yichud Gaim. Okay, so that's what I was referring to before. I'm sorry. Okay, I don't know if we're going to get to that tonight. V'tira Zichron Levracha l'stakel b'fnei Penuya l'misha mistakel b'ladash yisa isalisha imti noah be'enav. The Gam, let's move ahead to the next page, the final page. The Gam Amru, Sharoi Lasses came. Not only is it allowed, but it's advisable. It behooves a person to do this. Shaloi Yisadam Isha Ad Shirena. A person should not marry a woman until he sees her. No mail order brides without photographs. That's not the way to go. So that, you can do long distance marriage. You can appoint, you can give power of attorney. You can make a person an agent to Makadosh and Isha for you, to marry a woman. Right? So you sent your friend to Medina Sayyam, to overseas, to bring you back a bride. Right? But you wanted her to be already taken, so to speak, when she was making the voyage back. So the guy put the ring on a woman's finger in front of two legal aid on your behalf. You're married. Okay? Reuven is married to Leah, even though Shimon, his agent, was the guy who put the ring on Leah's finger. Leah shows up, and Reuven is repulsed by it. He doesn't like the way Leah looks. That's a bad thing. Would you ruin a young girl's life? Would you schlep her from across the ocean? What's the point? Therefore, Chazal say, a person should not marry a woman until he sees her. He shouldn't come to divorce her later if she becomes ugly in his eyes. The details, the minutiae of the halachas of this mitzvah are scattered throughout the Talmud. Number 13. V'noheges b'chol makom v'chol zman b'schar u'nekevis. You know what? It's like, I'm not going to do 13. I want to do a little Minchas Chinuch tonight. Okay. So there's a lot to recapitulate, but just to go very briefly and not exhaustively, the Rambam and the Chinuch hold that the pasuk of Leisikru v'legalas erva means that there are certain activities short of actual sexual intercourse that are prohibited between the prohibited couplings of the Torah's Arayas code, min ha-Torah, on a Torah level. The ones that we saw clearly so far are chibuk, nishuk, and yichud. Hugging, kissing, and seclusion. There are a whole bunch of other activities that the Rabbanan forbade. Okay? Suggestive physical gestures. Smelling the perfume. looking at the clothing, etc. Okay? We also know that within the Torah level prohibition forbidding yichud seclusion, there are certain exceptions. Okay, parents can have yichud with their children, husbands can have yichud with their neither wives, with the exception of a groom who has not consummated the marriage. Yes?
It didn't say brother and sister, regular brother and sister.
It did not.
It did not. What is their thing about that?
Hopefully we'll get to it, but probably not till next week. Just be patient. Okay, for right now, the one that I want to do tonight, because we don't have a lot of time, is let's take a look on Roman numeral 2. Let's take a look at paragraph 20. And the sidebar reads, Kreva bezachu behema. What's the rule vis-a-vis kirva, coming close to, the kind of things that are prohibited with kirva, when you're talking about another male or an animal? Okay? That's also part of the Parsha of Arayos. Not just prohibited human relationships, brother relations, or marital relations, in-laws, right? But we know also part of it is that human beings shouldn't be intimate with animals, and two males should not be intimate with one another. Fine. So what do we know so far? We know, we just read, that Chazal allow seclusion with animals and seclusions of two males together. Shlo nechshdu Yisrael al kach. Klal Yisrael is not chashud on such things. What about the other things? What about hugging and kissing? I have a pet dog. Can I hug my dog? Right? I have a draft horse. I'm a rancher. I get her into the barn at night. She's a mare. If he's a stallion, I don't think that really makes a difference. And, I give her hay. I give her the sugar cube that she so richly deserves. She really schlepped a big load for me. Can I kiss her on can I nuzzle up to her, on the snout? Is that okay? Let's see. V'hinei. Okay, you got it again. Roman numeral 2, paragraph 20. V'hinei. B'chol chayve krisis chayve malchus ala kreva. All the things that are prohibited by kares or worse, right? Brother and sister, sex, another man's wife, and so on. So, Yechayev Malchus on Kreva, coming close to meaning hugging and kissing, is something that is forbidden on a Torah level with Malchus. It's on par with wearing wool linen combinations, with eating chazer. Right? It's a flogging, it's Malchus, corporal punishment. Somebody who, that is, his words to me are very, very confusing. I don't have it clear. He says, one who comes on to a male. Okay? That's usually, most places in the Gemara and in the Poskim, that means that you went all the way. Okay, the word is bia. The Talmudic euphemism for sexual intercourse is coming, or coming upon. Okay? So, Ba'al Azach or Ba'al Behema, somebody who has bia with a male or with an animal, Chayv Malchus ala Kreva, Kener Li Pashit. Such a person will get Malchus for the preludes, for hugging and for kissing. Certainly easier to picture if you're talking about male homosexuality, right? But what does he mean here? It's hard to understand, it's hard to believe that he would mean that if it was only being done as a prelude to the actual intercourse, right? Because generally speaking, then we have a rule of Kam Lemid Ramin. The guy's going to be put to death. Right? You're going to flog him before you put him to death. Right? Or maybe say, no, they're two distinct acts. One do we say Kam Lemid Ramin, one do we say that the greater of the two punishments supersedes, right, where it's all in one unified act. Right? I murder somebody on Shabbos, right, and at the time, I shouldn't say murder somebody on Shabbos. You murder somebody, you're an axe murderer, and at the time that you strike him in the chest with your axe, you also bloodied his shirt and you totally ruined his shirt. You don't have to pay his estate for the shirt because you're going to be put to death for murder. Because that's all one unified act. But here you can say, well, the hugging and munching took place at 12:15, and the actual intercourse didn't take place till 12:30. So those are two distinct acts. So yeah, maybe that's what he means. But it sounds odd to me. V'yatzalan ladina. One second, I just want to see what this footnote test says over here. So there's a pirush, if you look on the bottom of your page, footnote number test. Okay, test with a half a parenthesis on it. Let's read it inside. It's in block letters again. The Minchas Yachid, okay, that's a pirush on the Minchas Chinuch called Minchas Yachid. Heyer, the logarua mi'imo bitu shem ben isakreva. Okay, not only is a father and mother allowed to be in seclusion respectively with their son and their daughter, they can also hug and kiss the son and daughter. Okay? So the Minchas Yachid says, if Klal Yisrael, it stands to reason that the Rabbanan were consistent, that those arayas that are exempt from the prohibition, from the Torah level prohibition of yichud, those arayas were arayas that no, over here we don't have to worry about it. Yes, it's prohibited by the Torah, but except for somebody really perverse, it's not going to happen. Father-daughter, incest is not going to happen. Mother-son, incest is not going to happen. Bestiality is not going to happen. Homosexuality is going to happen. Yichud is allowed. Okay, a father can be in seclusion with his daughter. Even the daughter is utterly defenseless and the father's a big burly guy, it doesn't matter. Klal Yisrael is not chashud for that kind of sin. They're not suspected of that kind of sin. So he says, well look, it's not just the prohibition of yichud that the rabbis lifted and said there's an exception to the rule. The other, look, it's all being learned out of one pasuk. Don't come close. What are the things that come close and that lead inexorably to the prohibited intercourse? Hugging, kissing, and seclusion. So if seclusion is allowed, hugging and kissing is also allowed. Jewish sons kiss their mothers at any age. Doesn't matter the age of the son, doesn't matter the age of the mother, and vice versa. Fathers and daughters. Right? So he's saying, the Minchas Yachid, he says, if you are allowed to go into seclusion, as we learned in the Chinuch, with an animal or with another male, why should you be able to hug and kiss an animal or a male? Okay? Your dog brings you your slippers and you want to pet and hug your dog, go right ahead. Yeah? Your draft horse did what it had to do and you want to kiss her on the snout, go right ahead. So says the Minchas Yachid. He doesn't understand the Chinuch. So too, by Behem and Zachar. Kreva coming close, the prohibitions of coming close shouldn't apply, don't apply. The Minchas Chinuch says it's a Dovid Pashut, right? So again, I'm being medayik a little bit in the lashon of the Minchas Chinuch. The Minchas Chinuch said, yeah, the typical Jew is not suspected of homosexuality, male homosexuality, or bestiality. But if it culminated in that heinous sex crime, right? I think that's where he's saying that he would get malchus for the prelude. But enochanami, I think the Minchas would also admit, you haven't seen your friend in 3 years, and you want to give him one of those man hugs. I don't think that's what the Minchas Chinuch is prohibiting either. We're talking about two gay males, right, who went all the way, right? So then maybe we could give them the malchus for the hugging and kissing that they did when they were only going 50, 60, 80% of the way. I'm not sure. But those of you who are literate in the Hebrew, do you see the point I'm making? I'm not sure if they're talking over each other or to each other, the Minchasani and the Minchas Chinuch, the Minchas Yachid and the Minchas Chinuch. Okay, let's read on back to the Chinuch. Okay, it's again paragraph 20, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm keeping you from your chavrusa, no?
Yeah.
What?
Explain.
What?
Yeah.
All right. V'yatzalan ladina. Dal kol harayos im hisru behem mishum alav hazeh chev malchus gam kein teikef al neshika. Okay, in all the arayos, if they were given asura, they were giving a good legal warning. Hey, don't hug and kiss your aunt, your mother's sister. Right? Don't do. Actually, I don't know if that's a good example. Your mother-in-law. Okay, don't hug and kiss your mother-in-law. What? Okay, keeping up to that prohibition is not a problem. Yeah, this is great. You know, the next time your mother-in-law approaches you, say, "Mom, I found religion. Stay far away from me." Okay, it's nothing personal. It's just my religion that prohibits me from doing this. Okay, so something like that. Okay, if you were given legal warning, hey. What do you mean? I'm not being intimate with her. It doesn't matter. There's a pasuk that says don't even come close. And Chazal defined kissing and hugging as coming close. You're getting too close for comfort. Don't do it. Leave me alone. I'm doing it anyway. Such a guy, again, in Talmudic times, in times where our legal system was up and running, will get malchus. We get corporal punishment. Ve'ein kan makom l'harg b'zeh yishma chacham. Okay. Parenthetically, and you have to understand something. Chazal itself, the Talmudic literature, is neither prudish nor lascivious. Okay, they talk about the full range of human sexual behavior and longings, but they don't indulge in it any more than they have to, and the explanations are sometimes quite curt. Okay, in my own mind, I'm not 100% sure. If when they say nishika over here, if there's kissing, if there's any distinction between a kiss on the lips and a kiss on the cheeks, okay, right? Nobody's going to say that if you touch one of the arayas like this, I'm not saying it's mutter to do, yeah, but nobody's going to say that if you touch one of the arayas like this, that you're going to get malchus, all right? The question is, when it says nishika over here, is a peck on a cheek nishika? Or they mean a kiss on the lips, the kind of things that we would associate, yeah, with foreplay, with a prelude to the actual bia. Vayim be'Evan Ezer simchaf b'chalkas mechaykek sivkat nalef hevi b'shem rashbatz. Skip the brackets. Mesugi divamas non hem beis the chavav beis the kamasham. Pritzus mi aser rachmana. When did the Torah prohibit pritzus? Pritzus means sexually demonstrative behavior. A pritzus, immodesty, right? But not intercourse itself. Where did the Torah prohibit that? Ein sham v'sugi l'nir d'nid al derech evram lo yasser rachmana mikol malkum b'neshikas ever asam v'natar. Okay, so here, with the couple of minutes that we have left, I'm going to show you how non-prudish the Gemara is. There's a machlokes in the Gemara as to the very definition. You know, we always thought we obsess in this class about shiurim, right? A revius, a kazayas, right? An olive's worth, how much time has to elapse, right? You need definitions, you need legal definitions of sexual intercourse too. And it's an argument in the Gemara. What is considered sexual intercourse? What are the two opinions? One opinion is nishika, kissing. Not kissing a peck on the cheeks, or not kissing lip to lip. Kissing is a euphemism for genitalia rubbing against one another. Even if there's zero penetration. Okay? If the male organ meets the female organ, even if there's immediate withdrawal, that's considered sexual intercourse. That's one opinion. The other opinion is there has to be what's called achnasus atara, which means penetration of the corona. Okay, not full penetration of the corona, that's already bia, right?
Dancing.
What?
Dancing close.
Dancing close is, we'll get to in a moment. Okay? Now, there's another term that the Gemara uses, and that is called bia derech evarim. Literally, that is intercourse through limbs. What does that mean? So Rashi in two places in Yavamis and inside that defines it differently. One is, what was the term you just used?
Dancing.
Dancing. One is, Rashi says, two people lying naked next to one another, absent any actual meeting of the genitals. That's something called bia derech evarim. Okay, in other places in Yavamis, Rashi seems to to imply that it means some kind of exercise of the male sexual organ, but on other parts of the woman's body other than on her genitals. On the breasts, on the thighs, other parts of the body. Depends which Rashi you're reading. Okay, so let's go back to the Minchat Chinuch and see what he's talking about. Now, the issue in the Gemara that the Chalkas Mechaykik, this commentary on the Shulchan Aruch is citing, the issue in that Gemara is what makes a woman into a sota. For those who are not familiar with the term sota, let me give you a brief primer on what that is. We know adultery is one of the capital punishments of the Torah. We know it's one of the 10 Commandments. A married woman is not allowed to be intimate with anyone other than her own husband. Okay? If that's done with Edom and Hasra, if that sin is committed in front of 2 witnesses with proper warning, then both partners of the crime are subject to capital punishment. Depending on a few variables, it could be 3 out of the 4 forms of capital punishment. I'm not going to go into the variables right now. Okay. That's if there's witnesses. What if there's no witnesses? Okay. No witnesses, we can't have due process. But here, singular among all the sins of the Torah, here the Torah came up with a supernatural trial. A trial that takes place on terra firma, but it's obviously miraculous, it's obviously God at work discerning the guilt or the innocence of the parties here. And that works as follows. There's something called Chinuch and Stira. A husband is of a suspicious nature. He has reason to believe that his wife is carrying on an affair, is cheating on him. And he says to his wife, and this has to happen in front of 2 kosher witnesses, he says, Al tistri imploni. I don't want you going into seclusion with so-and-so, with Mr. X. Okay? And she ignores it, and she does go into seclusion with this guy, then it's not a capital offense in and of itself yet. Then there's a process by which her husband has the right to take her down to the temple, and in the temple she has to bring a certain sacrifice, and after the sacrifice she's subjected to a certain trial. She's given a certain potion prepared by the Kohen, and she drinks this potion. If she's guilty, she dies on the spot, a rather gruesome death. Okay? Now, does she die on the spot, but her paramour, wherever he is, also dies on the spot. Parenthetically, this only works, this supernatural thing only works if the husband accusing the wife is himself free of any sexual indiscretion. The Gemara says that this supernatural trial stopped at some point in the Second Temple period because there were so many promiscuous husbands that there were a lot of women who were guilty. Their neighbors knew about it, and they started scoffing. They said, you see, the Torah is bogus. We know she's guilty. And the trial didn't work. And what they didn't realize was they knew that the wives were guilty. They didn't know what the husbands were doing on the business trips, so to speak. So therefore, so as not to make a mockery out of the Torah, the whole institution of Sota was suspended. But anyway, so there's a whole tractate in the Talmud that deals with the minutiae of the laws of Sota. And one of the questions is, what if the husband doesn't say, I don't want you going into seclusion with somebody. Let's say, I don't want you having sex with somebody. But what happens if he specifies a particular sexual activity? Okay? Let's say he says, I don't want you lying naked with the man. All right? I don't care if your genitalia meet, if you don't go anything beyond that. Okay? I don't want you sleeping in one bed, you naked and him naked. Is that a legal warning? Is that a chinuch or not? And that's where the Gemara has this conversation. Did the Torah forbid pretzes? Did the Torah only prohibit? Did the Torah ever prohibit immodest behavior? Torah only prohibited actual sex. Right? We'll have to pick it up next week. I'm being grabbed by the clock. But that's the issue he's discussing. We're going to have to see in the various Rishonim if they really meant to say that there's no pasuk in the Torah prohibiting such a thing, or that even though there might be a pasuk in the Torah prohibiting such a thing, but it's not something that a person can make chinuch with. There's a proper form for chinuch, for this warning that a suspicious husband is supposed to issue to his wife. And he shouldn't specify and say, I don't want you doing this particular activity, that particular activity. For the chinuch to be legal, he has to just say, I don't want you going into seclusion with Mr. So-and-so. Okay, gentlemen, please note the new time and watch your inboxes based on everyone's arrival tonight, maybe we'll start a little later next week. Okay, good night.
Quick question, prohibited women.
Yes.
Supposing in some cases, you don't know if she's prohibited or not.
Then discretion is the better part of valor.
Oh, so she's